I can't fix this. He didn't mean to say it out loud, but it escaped anyway. Tired, human. Travis Langston, Billionaire CEO, one of Forbes' most photographed faces in tech, sat alone in the far corner of Mama June's diner in New Orleans, hunched over a half-empty mug of cold coffee, whispering defeat to no one. His voice cracked under the weight of a storm no stock option could shield him from. In that moment, he wasn't a titan of industry. He was just a man unraveling. And someone heard him. I can fix it. 3 words, soft but firm. Not a question. Not pity. Just a promise. They came from Ava Riley, a 28-year-old waitress with almond-brown skin, a no-nonsense walk, and the kind of eyes that could read a man's soul better than any resume. She stood there in her faded uniform, not blinking, not backing down. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, the kind that makes powerful people stop and listen. Travis looked up, startled. Ava didn't flinch. She just poured his refill and waited, like she'd been in this moment before. Like she knew what was coming. And maybe she did. This wasn't just a breakdown in a diner. This was the beginning of a story most people never hear. A black story. A real one. The kind where a black woman with no degrees and no spotlight becomes the compass for a man lost in his own empire. The kind where dignity walks in on worn-out sneakers and changes the world one uncomfortable truth at a time. This isn't a headline. This is what happens when the overlooked are finally heard. If you believe stories like this matter, if you think the voices of people like Ava deserve more than a passing glance, tap like right now. Do it not for views, but for value. Because this isn't just a viral moment. This is the black story you were never supposed to forget. And it's just getting started. Ava Riley never planned to be the kind of woman who waited tables. But life, as she often said, had its own kind of GPS, and sometimes it rerouted you whether you liked it or not. She was born and raised in New Orleans, in a neighborhood that never made the brochures but built people with steel in their bones. Her mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, died of an aneurysm when Ava was just 20. Her father had walked out long before that. Left with a younger brother to raise and a grandmother who was slipping into memory loss, Ava put her dreams of a psychology degree on hold and picked up an apron. She'd been working at Mama June's diner for 6 years. The place was small, barely 15 tables, but it was the kind of spot where regulars knew each other's birthdays and the jukebox still played Al Green. It didn't look like much from the outside, but it was honest. And Ava liked that. She liked knowing that her tips came from how she made people feel, not how she made them look. Ava wasn't flashy, but you noticed her. She walked with confidence, the kind that didn't come from money or influence, but from knowing who she was. 5'7", athletic build, natural curls tied back in a loose bun. Her skin carried a quiet glow, deep brown, sun-kissed, and her voice, when she spoke, always made people slow down and listen. She had a way of making people tell her things they hadn't even said to themselves. She'd heard it all. Drunk confessions, broken marriage stories, business plans sketched on napkins. But she never judged. That was her secret. Ava knew pain had 1,000 faces, and none of them looked the same. Most of her shifts started before sunrise and ended well after the city lights flickered on. She didn't complain. She didn't have time to. There were bills to pay, her little brother Malik's community college tuition to cover, and her grandmother's prescriptions to manage. She moved through life like a soldier, battle-worn but unbroken. And despite everything she carried, grief, responsibility, exhaustion, Ava still made room for kindness. She remembered names. She noticed when people seemed off. And on that particular morning, when a billionaire whispered a sentence he thought no one would hear, she didn't hesitate. Because Ava Riley had seen broken before. And she'd learned how to fix things. Even if no one ever asked her to. Travis Langston had spent his entire adult life building things. Buildings. Brands. Billion-dollar valuations. He was the kind of man people wrote profiles about, magazines with glossy covers calling him a visionary, a disruptor, a man ahead of his time. But none of those articles ever mentioned what Travis looked like when no one was watching. They didn't show the dark circles beneath his eyes, the way his hands trembled just slightly when no one else was around. They didn't hear the way he sometimes muttered to himself, like he was trying to convince the ghosts of his decisions that he'd made the right ones. At 41, Travis was considered young in his world. CEO of Ridevia, a company he'd founded in a garage in Austin that now rivaled Tesla in the electric vehicle market. His suits were custom Italian. His watches? Limited edition. His house in Napa had been featured in a lifestyle spread last fall. But that morning, he was none of those things. He was a man quietly falling apart. The scandal had hit 3 weeks earlier. A leaked internal report from Ridevia's HR department showed clear patterns: qualified black applicants being passed over, a lack of promotions for employees of color, complaints of microaggressions being buried or ignored. Travis, in his first public statement, had called it a miscommunication. That word sparked a firestorm. He tried to fix it the way he fixed everything, by hiring a crisis PR firm, launching a scholarship program, holding an employee town hall. But nothing touched the core issue. People no longer trusted him. The public saw him as just another rich white man pretending not to notice the mess he helped create. What made it worse was that Travis didn't see himself that way. He genuinely believed he was one of the good ones. He had donated to civil rights groups, spoken on panels about equity in tech, even dated a black woman in college. But now, none of that mattered. His track record didn't excuse his blind spots. And on that particular morning in New Orleans, as rain smeared the diner windows and a hangover pressed against his temples, Travis felt something he hadn't felt in years: powerless. He didn't come to Mama June's for comfort food. He came because it was quiet. Because no one there cared who he was. Because he needed, just for a minute, to stop pretending that he was still in control. He didn't expect to be saved. And certainly not by a waitress. When Ava said, "I can fix it," she didn't expect him to respond. Most men in suits just ignored her. Some gave a polite nod. A few acted like she was invisible. But Travis Langston looked up, and not just with his eyes. His whole face shifted, like something inside him had just been shaken awake. "You can fix what?" he asked, voice raspy, half skeptical, half curious. She tilted her head, wiped her hands on her apron, and leaned slightly closer. "Whatever's breaking you." He blinked, confused. "I didn't say anything was." "You didn't have to," she interrupted gently. There was a pause. The kind that fills a room when two very different people realize they're subtly alone in the same truth. Travis chuckled dryly. "You always psychoanalyze your customers?" "Only the ones who look like they haven't slept in days and whisper to themselves between bites of toast," Ava replied. He smiled, almost. And then, before he could think better of it, he asked, "Do you know who I am?" Ava crossed her arms, unbothered. "Sure. You're the guy who runs Ridevia. The one who went on TV and called racism a miscommunication." Travis's jaw tightened. "That wasn't what I... But it's what you said." Ava cut in. "Words matter. Especially when they come from people who write the rules." He looked at her, really looked this time. She wasn't impressed by him. She wasn't trying to flatter or shame him. She was just there. Honest. Unfiltered. "Look," he said, softer now. "I've made mistakes. But I'm not a racist." Ava's eyes didn't flinch. Racism isn't just calling someone the N-word. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's designing systems that reward people who look like you and overlook people who look like me. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally asked, "What should I do?" Ava leaned on the booth table, lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Start listening to the people you don't usually hear. Not just the loud ones with degrees and big titles. The quiet ones. The ones who don't get a seat at your table. Or any table." He stared at her. The waitress. The woman he'd dismissed before she spoke. And in that moment, he realized something unexpected. She wasn't just right. She was the only one who had told him the truth. The next morning, Ava found something tucked under the napkin dispenser at her usual booth. A white envelope. No name. Just her section of the diner. Just like that, like it had waited for her overnight. Inside was a business card, simple, elegant, weighty, and a handwritten note. You were right. I'm listening now. Come speak where it matters. Tuesday, 11 a.m. Rydivia HQ. My office. TL. She stared at it for a full minute, then flipped the card over. Travis Langston, Chief Executive Officer. Address printed in sleek gray lettering. No phone number. No assistant's name. Just an invitation. Ava sat down, still in her apron, still holding a pen dripping with syrup from a breakfast order. She read the note again, unsure whether to laugh or tear it up. It didn't make sense. Why would someone like him want someone like her to walk into his world? She didn't wear power suits or carry credentials. She didn't have degrees framed on her wall. What she had was instinct, truth, and a lived understanding of injustice that no policy memo could teach. That night, she told her grandmother. The old woman leaned back in her recliner, nodded slowly, then looked at Ava with that quiet fire in her eyes. Sometimes, her grandmother said, it takes someone from the kitchen to fix what's broken in the boardroom. Ava shook her head. I'm not qualified to tell CEOs how to run things. Her grandmother smiled. You're qualified to tell the truth. That's more rare than you think. For the next 2 days, Ava debated it. She practiced what she might say, then threw it all away. She imagined walking into a building full of people who thought she didn't belong, and then decided she didn't care. She wasn't going there to impress them. She was going there to speak. To speak for the folks who never got past HR filters. For the black kids whose names alone kept them from interviews. For her brother Malik, who had a perfect GPA and still got called articulate like it was a surprise. Tuesday came fast. She wore her cleanest outfit, pulled her curls into a neat puff, and stood outside Rydivia's glass tower in downtown New Orleans. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She felt necessary. The boardroom was colder than she expected. Not in temperature, but in energy. Polished glass walls, a long walnut table that stretched like a runway, and a dozen people dressed in the kind of sharp fashion that costs more than most folks' monthly rent. Ava felt every eye on her as she entered. Some curious, some skeptical, one or two clearly annoyed. No one stood to greet her. No one offered a smile. Travis sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Everyone, this is Ava Riley. She's here at my invitation, he said calmly, before gesturing to the seat at the far end. Please. She walked to the seat, slowly, deliberately, refusing to rush. She didn't shrink. Didn't apologize. Didn't perform. Just sat down, spine straight, hands folded. Waiting. A man in a blue suit, mid-50s, silver hair, expensive watch, leaned forward. Miss Riley, thank you for coming. Before we begin, can you share your qualifications? The words landed like a challenge, not a question. Ava met his eyes. I'm a waitress, she said plainly. A pause. Someone in the room chuckled softly. I serve people who are rarely listened to. I clean up after men who throw tantrums when the world doesn't bend their way. I've seen more truth in that diner than you'll find in any quarterly report. Silence followed. Then she leaned in. You want numbers? Here's one. 37%. That's how many qualified black applicants your own hiring data shows were passed over last year. Want another? 0. That's how many of those cases triggered an internal review. A woman in a tight black blazer narrowed her eyes. How did you get that data? Travis spoke for the first time. I gave it to her. Murmurs rippled across the table. Ava didn't flinch. I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm here to show you what you're refusing to see. Bias isn't always loud. Sometimes it's coded in the systems you trust. It's in the filters, the algorithms, the way you define culture fit. The room shifted. The energy, once stiff with arrogance, now carried a different weight. One of unease. Of reckoning. I don't want your job, Eva said finally. I want you to understand what your decisions do to people like me. People like my brother. People who never make it past the lobby. Travis leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on hers. And for the first time, the boardroom listened. The silence after Ava's final sentence lingered like smoke after a fire. No one in the boardroom moved. No one cleared their throat. No one knew what to say next. Travis sat still at the head of the table, his hands clasped tightly, eyes locked on a water glass that had long since gone warm. His jaw was clenched, his shoulders stiff. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man realizing, all at once, how far he had drifted from what mattered. A younger executive broke the silence. With all due respect, this isn't productive, he said, flipping his pen between his fingers. We appreciate Miss Riley's perspective, but we have policies in place. We conduct diversity training. We post open positions publicly. We're not a racist company. Ava leaned back, unfazed. You're not listening. Racism isn't just about intent. It's about impact. It's about who gets left behind and who keeps getting promoted. The man looked to Travis for backup, but Travis didn't speak. Then the woman in the black blazer from earlier chimed in. This is turning into a spectacle. We invited her here to offer feedback, not a public scolding. Ava didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. If the truth feels like a scolding, she said quietly, maybe the problem isn't me. Travis stood up suddenly, his chair scraping the polished floor. His voice cracked, low and hoarse. Everyone out. The room froze. I said out, he repeated, this time louder. One by one, the executives gathered their folders, their tablets, their thin defenses, and walked out, their shoes echoing through the glass hallways. No one argued. No one looked back. Now it was just Ava and Travis. He ran a hand down his face, exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Then he sat back down, hunched over, his suit no longer crisp, his image no longer polished. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. I don't know how to fix this. Every step I take feels wrong. Every word I say gets twisted. Ava didn't blink. That's because you're still trying to fix a broken system with the same tools that broke it. He looked up, eyes glassy, voice barely above a whisper. Then help me. She nodded slowly. I will. She didn't offer a smile. Only a truth. But first, you need to let go of the version of yourself that never made space for people like me. The next morning, Ava didn't walk into Rydivia as a guest. She walked in with a plan. Not a fancy pitch deck. Not buzzwords or slogans. Just a spiral notebook and a pen, the kind servers use to take orders. But what was inside that notebook would shake the foundation of the company's entire approach to equity. Travis was waiting for her in the same conference room, but this time, the air felt different. He looked tired, but lighter somehow, as if dropping the mask had finally let him breathe. You said you'd help, he said, nodding toward the notebook. Show me. Ava opened to the first page. Step 1, Anonymous Resume Review, she began. Strict names, schools, zip codes. Let hiring managers judge on skills, not assumptions. He nodded slowly, already typing notes. Step 2, Reverse Shadowing, she continued. Have executives follow hourly employees for a full day. No cameras, no press releases, just watching. Learn what it means to be invisible in your own company. Travis raised an eyebrow. That's going to make some people uncomfortable. Good, Ava replied. Discomfort is where learning begins. She flipped to the next page. Step 3, Bias Trigger Tests. Build them into your software. Let algorithms flag patterns where one kind of applicant keeps getting rejected. And when it happens, don't ignore it, intervene. Travis sat back in his chair, processing. This is practical, he said. It's not about optics. It's about infrastructure. Ava nodded. Change doesn't start in your press kit. It starts in your code, in your payroll system, in your boardroom. You don't need better messaging. You need better habits. He rubbed his forehead, like he could already feel the resistance coming from within his own leadership team. You really think this will work? Ava paused. Then she looked him dead in the eye. I think if it doesn't, nothing else will. There was no fanfare, no handshake or contract, just a quiet understanding between two people who had no business sitting across from each other, but somehow had found the exact partnership both of them needed. By noon, Ava was appointed special advisor to the CEO on equity and systems change. Not HR. Not DEI. This role answered only to Travis. And finally, for the first time, someone was building the future from the ground up, with the people who knew what the ground felt like. It started with a photo. Travis and Ava, standing side by side in front of Rydevia's headquarters. No podium, no press release. Just a candid moment, Ava holding her notebook, Travis without a tie, both looking like they had just come out of a real conversation, not a photo op. The caption read, "Meet Ava Riley. She doesn't have a title yet, but she's already changing everything." Travis posted it on his personal social media account, thinking nothing of it. But within hours, it spread like wildfire. The internet had questions. Who was she? Why was she there? Why wasn't she in a suit? And more than anything, why would a billionaire CEO bring a waitress into the highest levels of corporate decision-making? Some praised the move as bold. Others called it desperate. But the loudest voices came from the ones who didn't want to see someone like Ava in a room like that. She's just a waitress. That line started trending, meant as an insult, a dismissal. But Ava didn't flinch. She went on a local talk show a few days later. Nothing flashy, just a midday segment with modest viewership. The host, trying to be polite, leaned in with the question that had been floating online all week. So, Ava, how does it feel to go from waiting tables to advising one of the most powerful CEOs in America? Ava looked straight into the camera. Calm. Clear. You call me a waitress like it's a weakness, she said. But being a waitress means I've learned to listen before I speak, read people before they ask for help, and serve without needing to be seen. She paused, then added, You want to reduce me to my job title? Fine. Let me serve something real. Let me serve accountability, clarity, and change. Because maybe the folks in suits need a little more of what we carry in aprons. The clip went viral. Millions of views. Tens of thousands of shares. Black and brown communities across the country lifted her name like a banner. A movement was forming, not because Ava asked for it, but because people saw something in her that reminded them of themselves. She didn't just walk into a boardroom. She walked into a system and dared to make it see her. And now the world was watching. Within a year, the numbers spoke louder than any headline. Rydevia's hiring stats shifted dramatically. Diversity in leadership roles increased by 34%. Employee retention among underrepresented groups surged. Bias trigger alerts built into the company's hiring software flagged and reversed dozens of flawed hiring decisions that would have previously gone unnoticed. Ava's initiatives weren't just working. They were changing the culture from the inside out. Universities reached out. Civil rights groups asked for consultations. Tech CEOs who once whispered about Rydevia's PR stunt now requested meetings, hoping to learn how the company had pulled off what others only talked about. Harvard even invited Ava to speak at their annual Innovation Summit. She stood behind a microphone, no slides, no flash. Just her voice. Clear, rooted, true. I didn't come from tech, she told the room. I came from truth. I came from serving people who've never had a voice in rooms like this. And if you don't bring their voices in, you're not leading. You're just decorating the power you already have." The applause lasted a long time. But not everyone was clapping. Inside Rydevia's boardroom, a rebellion was brewing. A small but vocal group of shareholders began pushing back, accusing Travis and Ava of steering the company away from its mission. They claimed the focus on equity was divisive, costly, and politically motivated. One investor went so far as to file a formal complaint to the board, saying, "Hiring should be about merit, not social statements." And frankly, this company is starting to look more like a diversity lab than a tech innovator. Ava didn't blink when the news hit her desk. She walked into the next shareholder meeting with that same notebook from the diner. And when she spoke, she didn't raise her voice. "Merit is a beautiful word," she said. "But too often, it's a mask. A way to pretend that the playing field was ever level. If we want to talk about merit, let's start by measuring who had to run twice as far just to reach the same starting line." Travis stood beside her. Not as a shield, not as a savior, but as a partner. And as the room debated, argued, and voted, one thing became clear. The people pushing for change weren't losing ground. They were planting something deeper. And the roots were already spreading. Travis Langston stood in front of a packed auditorium at the National Leadership Summit. The lights were warm, the cameras rolling, and 1,000 eyes waited for him to speak. But he wasn't the same man who once stumbled into a diner looking for peace and found truth instead. He adjusted the mic, cleared his throat, and looked to the front row. There she was, Ava Riley. No longer a waitress. Not just an advisor, but a change maker. A force. And Travis knew it. "I used to think leadership was about vision," he began. "But vision without awareness is blindness." The audience leaned in. "I built a company from the ground up," he continued. "But I failed to see who was still left at the ground. I thought if I wasn't actively discriminating, I was doing enough. Turns out, silence is a decision too." He paused, glanced down at the speech he had written but no longer needed. "I stand here because someone who had every reason not to care, cared anyway. Ava Riley didn't just help fix my company. She helped fix me." There was no dramatic music. No rehearsed applause. Just a moment of truth landing exactly where it needed to. After the speech, reporters swarmed. Headlines wrote themselves, "The CEO who stepped aside to let a waitress lead," and "From apron to advisory, Ava Riley's rise." But Ava kept quiet. She had no interest in fame. Her focus remained the same: systems, justice, dignity. Weeks later, Time magazine released a cover that would become iconic. Travis and Ava stood shoulder to shoulder, not in suits or spotlight glamour, but in simple clothing. Real. Human. The headline read, "The Fixers." When asked by a journalist what that title meant to him, Travis didn't hesitate. "It means I stopped pretending I had all the answers. It means I started listening to someone who knew how to ask the right questions." Ava had once told him, "If you want to change a system, start with how it treats the people it thinks don't matter." He'd built a company with data. But it was a woman with no title who taught him how to lead with soul. And in doing so, she gave him something no stock price ever could. Purpose. Ava once said, "You don't have to change the whole world. Just change your corner of it, and do it like it matters." That's exactly what she did. She didn't walk into that diner knowing she'd rewrite the way a billion-dollar company treats people. She didn't expect to be on magazine covers or speaking in rooms that once felt locked to people like her. She didn't need a spotlight. She needed integrity. And when the moment came, she showed up with her full self, flaws, fire, and all. The lesson in this story isn't just about Ava's rise. It's not even about Travis's transformation. It's about what happens when we stop dismissing people based on where they stand and start listening to where they've been. It's about the power of proximity. Because the people closest to the pain are often closest to the solution. And maybe you're not a CEO. Maybe you're not in a position of power, but you do have a voice. You have influence. And most importantly, you have the choice to care. You can choose to look again at the people the world overlooks. You can choose to listen deeper. You can choose to ask, how can I help? And really mean it. Because change doesn't always start in a boardroom. Sometimes, it starts over coffee. With a notebook. With someone brave enough to speak truth in a room full of silence. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone in your life who sees more than they show, or if you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, I want you to do one thing. Drop a comment. Tell us your story. Tell us about a moment you chose to speak up, or about someone who saw value in you when no one else did. And if you believe that everyday people can do extraordinary things, if you believe in the power of real stories, Black stories, human stories, tap like. Share this video. Let someone know that being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's often the beginning of something revolutionary. Because dignity doesn't come from job titles. It comes from choosing to show up anyway. And the world needs more people who aren't waiting for permission to fix what's broken. So what's your story? What's your corner? And what are you ready to fix?